Recording in progress.
Well, good evening, everybody. It's Chris here from the Whistle Stop Cafe in Mirror, Alberta, and I am also a strong supporter and advocate for the Alberta Prosperity Project. If you don't already know the Alberta Prosperity Project, they are an educational society, and their goal is to educate Albertans as to the necessity for the merits, the benefits of Alberta independence, and the path to get there. So tonight we have a special guest. Her name is Margaret Kopala, correct? Did I get it right?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, good. Okay, I'm 1 for 1 so far. So a little bit about Margaret. She was born in 1945, although you wouldn't know it from looking at her, but so good on you, Margaret. Born in 1945 in northeastern Alberta. Margaret was educated in Edmonton, where she became East Glen Composite High's first girl president of the Students' Union. She graduated from the University of Alberta with a BA in English Lit and a BFA in drama, then traveled to Europe before working in British television production, mostly for the BBC and in the Canadian feature film industry. Citizens' initiatives on the Constitution led to her being selected as an ordinary Canadian in the conferences leading to the Charlottetown Accord. That's awesome. Active in citizen-based public policy forums as well as church and community life, Margaret's articles and letters have been widely published and can be read on this website. She has also produced and hosted community television shows and regularly provides media commentary on conservative issues. In 1997, she was the Progressive Conservative candidate in Ottawa West Nepean, and then became one of the earliest and most active proponents of unity between the PC and Reform parties. She subsequently contested the nominations in Ottawa West of the newly formed Canadian Alliance and Conservative parties in 2000 and 2005, respectively. As chair of the National Debaters Forum, she organized nationally televised debates between leading politicians, commentators, and academics such as David Frum, Hugh Segal, Ted Morton, Charles Taylor, and Tom, oh boy, this is a tough one. I'm going to try and get it right. 14. No longer active in partisan politics, Margaret concluded several years of writing freelance columns for the Ottawa Citizen in 2009. She continues to write on public policy issues, and after serving as Director of Research and Policy Development for the Canadian Centre for Policy Studies, she founded and served as President of the Centre for Immigration Policy Reform until 2015. Resident in Ottawa since 1986, she is married to political philosopher and journalist Dr. Robert Sibley. They have one grown son, psychologist Dr. Daniel Kopala Sibley. So that is quite the intro, and I did watch a couple videos of your stuff a couple days ago, and I can see why it's so well put together. I mean, you've been involved in policy and politics and advocacy for longer than I've been alive. So, well, thank you for that.
It's in the blood.
Yeah.
I'm a self-confessed wonk. There isn't a problem out there that I don't think about how to solve it, and particularly in the political field. So, an opportunity comes my way. C2C has recently been publishing a lot of my material. C2C Journal has been publishing a lot of my material. So I just dig right in.
Awesome. That's good, because there's I'm of the opinion that there's two types of people in the world: those who talk about problems and those who deal with them. So it's always great to hear from people who want to deal with problems. So with that said, and in the context of the videos I've seen of stuff you've done over the last few days, what kind of problems are you looking to find solutions for these days? Like, everything's fine. We live in a free and democratic society. Nothing wrong. So why would there be any problems?
Well, they're too numerous really to even begin to enumerate. I mean, everything from wokeism to globalism to, the sheer inadequacy in a lot of ways of our leading public figures who are just do not quite ever seem to be up to the job. We see it in the United States, we see it here in Canada, we see it in Europe. Lots of backlash against establishment thinking, lots of, you're sampling it there in Alberta, you go through it routinely. But more specifically, I was absolutely incensed with how the pandemic was being managed. I dug down into all the issues around the mandates and around the treatment, the controversies around COVID-19 treatments, and latterly, and the issue that brings me to you today is, of course, the influence of the World Economic Forum. C2C asked me to do a review of a new book that has just been published in the last couple of weeks, which is a series of essays which argue against the Great Reset. The Great Reset, as espoused by the World Economic Forum, and in particular its leader, Klaus Schwab, who's written now 3 books effectively on the subject. Just to bring your readers and your viewers up to speed, the World Economic Forum was first established in 1971 by Schwab, who was a professor of business in Switzerland and economics, and it's slowly grown to be, started out as a talk fest. He gathered together the world's industrial, technocratic, political elite on a regular basis to a place in Switzerland called Davos, which then became a regular annual thing where they would network and talk big ideas about how industry should work, how the world should work, and eventually just got everybody who was anybody coming to these events. Well, what should have remained a mere talk fest and a networking opportunity turns out not to have been stayed that way. And what has come to our attention is how slowly a whole agenda has developed around the World Economic Forum, which is slowly insinuating itself into various parts and aspects of how the world works. Because they have so many influential members who are extremely well-heeled, they have the wherewithal, the means, and the skills with which to do this. So what's the agenda, you say? So the agenda is very clearly spelled out in three books written by Schwab himself. The first one in 1971, where he talks about something called stakeholder capitalism. The second one, where he educates his readership on the subject of the fourth industrial revolution. Of course, we know that we've had at least one industrial revolution, the big one, that we know for which we only have really good data starting in the late 18th century, which was which brought us industrialization and yes, fossil fuels. If you look at any chart of world growth, economic growth in the world, you'll see that from time immemorial, the chart was like this, but the minute you add fossil fuels to the mix, growth goes like this, straight up. Mm-hmm. It's a spike in the human dynamic. So, yes, and that in turn, that first industrial revolution, yes, has turned into various types of innovation, brought with it various types of innovation, which in turn have spurred more kinds of revolutions, He's calling this one the fourth. I personally have written a book on the subject of the technological transition cycle, in which there's a great body of scholarship that shows how, through a combination of innovation and cheap energy sources, capitalist economies undergo major cyclical change. In capitalist economies, it takes the form of expansion, crisis, and contraction. Depressions come along every 50 to 60 years. So to that extent, Schwab is on the right track in talking about a Great Reset, as he does in his final book, which is The Great Reset. So the question was, now I'm no authority on either Schwab or the World Economic Forum. All I know about it is what has been written and detailed in this wonderful book, which is the title of which is Against the Great Reset. But I was happy to give it, 100% endorsement, because I ended up so well educated about the World Economic Forum. And I urge all your viewers to go out and get themselves a copy of this book. I think it's a gift. It's a gift to conservatives because it is so informative. And what you've got is 18 scholars, far more erudite than I am, who will look at all different aspects of the Great Reset. And from various perspectives, economic, cultural, religious, and of course, historical. And these are very, very, very prestigious writers. People, Douglas Murray, Victor Hansen, these will be authors that will be familiar. They're out on YouTube all the time, so they may actually be familiar to some of your viewers as well. So yes, this is how I come to all of a sudden found myself immersed in the subject of the World Economic Forum. Well, little did I know that that they had actually, before I started this project, that the World Economic Forum had actually was already out there, doing contracts with various governments. This TalkFest, this networking organization, all of a sudden was out there actually doing stuff, and doing stuff that slotted right in with the agendas and the ideas that were being fulminated on their website. There's a massive website that describes the World Economic Forum, who they are, what they're doing, and their ideas for how the world should work. These are
Sorry to interrupt. This became concerning and downright frightening to me when it became not just ideas and talking points and things like that, but it started to influence policy. Because what I'm seeing, a lot of the politicians these days, one comes to mind, Justin Trudeau. He is a very strong advocate for a Great Reset of some sort. He also admires China's basic dictatorship. He says that a small fringe group of Canadians have unacceptable views and shouldn't be tolerated. So my concern is when you have groups like the WEF no longer just offering solutions and giving some ideas, when you have them starting to influence policy, I never voted for any of them. I never asked for that stuff to be brought into my government, and now we have our politicians putting forth some of their stuff as policy. That's what concerns me. So, well, I guess a burning question is the WEF and what they're doing threatening our democracy?
Well, it's not just the World Economic Forum. We are now on the brink of having a whole layer of jurisdictions, presiding way above our legislatures, of people who are these, I call them these faceless technocrats in remote institutions, who are coming out with, dare I say, Stalin-esque prescriptions for how the world should work. And whether it's climate change or whether it's most recently it's the World Health Organization, which has in the last few months tried to assign to itself the authority to determine how pandemics should be managed on a global level. Now, I mean, nobody elected these people. They are, yes, they're experts. Many are, pure experts in their area. No problem with that. But they're there now trying to tell us what to do and how we should go about it. Not only that, but when you start drilling down to who's linked to who and how they're all functioning together. I'll give you an interesting set of dates I have prepared for this. I'm going to give you a little timeline on the pandemic and who some of these players are. You've got, in October of 2019, there was something, Johns Hopkins University organized something called Event 201. What was Event 201? It was a small confabulation, a little consortium of the World Economic Forum, representatives from the World Economic Forum, Johns Hopkins, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and so on, to discuss what to do in case there was a pandemic. That's October 2019. In December of 2019, the virus broke out in Wuhan. In January of 2020, the World Health Organization declared a national and a public health emergency of international concern. By March, they declared a pandemic. And by July of 2020, you had Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum publishing a book called The Great Reset, and how the pandemic was such a wonderful opportunity. Mm-hmm. That word is out there a lot, right? You remember
our own Prime Minister said
it was a great opportunity to rebuild, reset, build back better, do all that stuff. Well, they had the language and everything all ready for everybody to use. Now, bear in mind that organizations like the World Health Organization, yes, it is funded by individual nations, but it is also funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. It is also funded by by various pharmaceutical companies. In other words, all kinds of vested interests, all of whom are tied to the World Economic Forum, all of whom are tied to, in Europe, it's the Wellcome Trust. I mean, you have this whole slew of I mean, I don't know if the word is oligarch is the correct word here, but you have this whole slew of high-powered, big, huge vested interests who are cross-influencing each other throughout these various organizations, and not one of us voted for any of them. So, okay, they may have the most wonderful ideas in the world about how things should work, and nobody doubts their expertise and their accomplishments. But hold on, is this right? Is this how things? Is this how things should work? I'm not sure. This is very troubling. Now, when Sean contacted me, or rather when I just heard, when we finally got the agenda for today's meeting, I did some, namely, how did the Alberta Health Service get caught up with the World Economic Forum? Because apparently there's a contract with the World Economic Forum, and so I did some digging around. What's the relationship between the Alberta Health Service and the World Health? Well, actually, there's a really nice little spiel from Alberta Health Services about this precise issue. And it's, couldn't be more encouraging, more positive, and more forward-looking. Why? Because the World Economic Forum apparently invited the Alberta Health Services to join in a very elite group of a consortium of health-related servers, people who are engaged in the health area. Who are they? Mayo Clinic, Johns Hopkins University, Duke University. There's probably a handful more of really high-end, really expert, best in their field kind of organizations. And you think, well, gee, that's really impressive, Alberta Health Services. And you can imagine how impressed they would be too, to be invited to join with this group. But then you ask yourself, well, hold on, why were they invited, and why wasn't anybody else invited? Well, maybe they are that great. Maybe Alberta has all kinds of potential. They're doing all kinds of great things. And yes, it makes sense that they should network and they should exchange ideas and get together. But then you say to yourself, but wait a minute, isn't this what best practice units do in various government departments? Or do government departments not have these best practice units, i.e. units who are active out there, always checking to see what other organizations are doing and how well they're doing them, and why, and connecting up with them and borrowing some ideas here and checking that idea. We live in the internet age. We live in the Zoom age. It's very easy to, check around. So you think, well, this sounds like some elite exclusive, big boys club that probably meets for nice expense account lunches and business travels by business class airfares and all that. And you okay. So that's one side of it. The other side of it is, I thought to myself, and I started checking around to see, well, where exactly is this? What is the state of Canadian healthcare in terms of its rankings internationally? And sure enough, what you find if you look around and check with the OECD's rankings, and it doesn't matter which study you look at. I just did a cursory look, but it smacks you in the face, frankly, that Canada's healthcare system, not only is it nowhere near the top, like Norway or Sweden, in terms of its health outcomes and value and access and all of those things. Not only is it nowhere near the top, it is somewhere just below the middle. And in some cases, it's at the bottom. Well, maybe not quite the bottom, because just underneath Canada is the United States. Well, the Mayo Clinic may be doing great things if you have the money to go to get work done there. But, and maybe that's something that Alberta is aspiring to offer this exclusive service that people will have to pay international. Well, we have one of those here in Ontario already. Well, fine, if that's what you're looking for. But I found myself thinking, hold on, why in this state? And there's all kinds of reasons why, I'm sure. But anybody who dares to really stick their neck out and say what's wrong with our healthcare system, one of the things that hits you is, it's not the doctors, it's not the cost of doctors, it's not the cost of nurses, it's not even the cost of infrastructure. It's the administration. We have all this administration. Yeah. And now we're saying it's all right for you to gad about. And so you see where we're going here. You have to find, well, what is the World Economic Forum's real agenda here? And what are they asking Alberta to buy into finally? Okay.
Well, they're asking to buy into more bureaucracy.
That I don't know.
I would say it carries more bureaucracy with it for sure. And interestingly enough, I just actually interviewed a man by the name of Dr. William Mackis yesterday, and he's been talking about the administrative side of AHS and how it's causing lower service, lower or worse outcomes for patients. There are reasons why our healthcare is the way it is, and it's because it's not about best practices when it comes to, this is my opinion, it's not about best practices when it comes to patient outcome. It's about best practices for the administration in order to keep their jobs and hire more administrators. And now we have a group of external administrators injecting themselves into our policy here. So that's right. If that's allowed, if our system is set up so that outside influences can do that, that's very concerning to me. Very concerning, yes. Especially considering these outside influencers. Now, in particular, the WEF has referred to human beings as useless eaters, right? This is a very dangerous group.
Yes, and I mean, and for a group which is it just blatantly espouses a globalist agenda. I mean, these are these are part of a group, a very big group of progressives out there who think that the answer to global problems is global solutions. And so you can see how, if you started integrating our healthcare systems and got the best and brightest from Canada to come in and join with the best and brightest over there, and how you then could maneuver and set it up so that it got that little bit more global, right? Mm-hmm. So it's as I say, it's very troubling. One of the things that the book Against the Great Reset, one of the most compelling arguments in it is against the Great Reset is that the great solutions to the world's problems have never come at the global level. They've always come from human ingenuity at the local level. Mm-hmm. So, and by taking that approach, you minimize risk. So if you do make a mistake, it's local. You're not making this mistake on a global scale. I mean, a global solution can easily become a global catastrophe.
And I think it has. We may be witnessing that unfold in real time as we speak. We had a global problem, or we thought we had a major problem. It turns out that it wasn't as major as we thought. We were pushed into a global solution, and now we're starting to see some serious fallout from that.
Indeed. And now, and of course, if you're referring, I'm assuming you're referring to the pandemic, and now the WHO wants to have carte blanche authority over how pandemics are managed. Now, I beg your pardon? So you see where this goes, and I mean, history is full of examples of how, whether it's basic innovations, simple things like the internal combustion engine or electrical engines, or the spinning wheel, or the assembly line. These are all the result of trial and error at the local level, and somebody then came up with exactly the right formula for coming up with that transformative innovation that the rest of the world then adopted. But that's how you have to do it. And the role of government in those situations was not to go out, make it happen. You can't make these happen. Individuals recognize problems and they work them out for themselves, and then they test them, and then they prove to everybody else that they're worthy ideas. Government doesn't have a role in that. I mean, you can, and whether with all the monetary and fiscal stimulus in the world, you can take the horse to water, but you can't make them drink. You cannot find those cheap sources of energy. You cannot find the answer to whatever little problem there is. It's going to be somebody in some lab somewhere, or somebody working in a field somewhere, or somebody. That's how these things happen. So and that is what our governments should be looking to enable. And one of the great essays in this, in Against the Great Reset, actually talks about how the Industrial Revolution came about in the first place in England. Pure and simple, two things: patent rights and property rights. All of a sudden, people knew that they were able to, that whatever they did would be their own, and they would profit from it, or they could promote them, or they could give them away, or do whatever they wanted with. But these things were theirs.
So the government created a path. They removed roadblocks.
That's right.
In order to encourage people to actually be innovative.
That's right.
That's what they should be doing. I totally agree with that. But I think we're seeing quite the opposite right now. And this is fresh on my mind because I actually just interviewed Dr. Peter McCullough again this morning. But what governments are doing right now, and quasi-government organizations like the College of Physicians and Surgeons and that type of thing, they're actually putting up roadblocks and preventing innovation, which I don't think in any time in history hasn't resulted in harms to people or loss of life. And we're seeing that right now. So a lot of these ideas coming from a global organization, a lot of this is putting more roadblocks to limit how we innovate and deal with problems on our own at a local level. But thank goodness there are some people who have the intestinal fortitude to innovate regardless of consequences. So we're seeing some move there. But I guess the $1 million question here is, and let me back up a minute. On the surface, it sounds good that we all work together globally. We all we have free trade and this and that. We all have equal opportunity, but I think they want equal outcome. It sounds great. Everybody has what they need. Nobody goes without. But there is a darker side to this. And what is it? I'm gonna let you explain it because I know you know. What is it about this idea of equal outcome for all that will cause devastating impacts on humanity?
Well, apart from anything else, it's impossible to achieve. There's a reason why our founding fathers, various political philosophers, have always talked in terms of individual rights and equal and limiting government to areas like helping with equality of opportunity. At least the governments can help a little bit with that by offering, basic healthcare, basic education, giving people that little bit of a leg up so that they can then fly from there. But guaranteeing equal outcome, think about where that goes. We would all end up, numbers on an assembly line somewhere
with no purpose and no reason to innovate.
No purpose and no reason to do anything at all, because it's all, it doesn't matter what you do. In fact, this is one of the crying descriptions that come out of communist systems, where people describe this colorless, lackluster life that they lead because nobody can do anything to improve their properties, nobody can do anything to change their jobs, nobody can do anything to do something a little bit better over there. You stand in line for this, you might do a little bit of, so no, equality of outcome is, but you see, we have, in the progressive left, and because of the corruption now of so much of our education systems and people, we have whole generation now that is growing up without knowing any of this stuff, who are not understanding even the most basic bits of history, or the most basic bits of particularly our political history, and how we got to where we are and why we are able to offer them the right to complain. On my favorite line, we're coming up to Remembrance Day. I seize every opportunity to say, we had millions of mostly white men who died for the right of the rest of us to complain about them. Now think about that. And do you know what? Most of them would do it again. Mm-hmm. It's but try to tell, try to say that without being called, would you be called a racist for saying that? I don't know. I haven't been so far.
I don't think you can mention nationality or color these days in any context without being called racist, but there's wokeism for you, I guess.
Yes.
In your digging you've done regarding the WEF in particular, because that's a hot topic right now. What have you found? Like, who are the people involved with this? Is there anyone involved in the WEF, say, maybe a board of trustees or anything like that, that's heavily integrated into Canadian politics?
Yes.
Like our policymakers?
What's interesting about this is that over the years, over the last 3 decades, when Klaus Schwab has been building this unit up, he's had a stream of individuals come through, young people particularly, that he has dubbed young global leaders. And yes, he is quite fond of pointing out that half of Trudeau's cabinet were World Economic Forum young global leaders. Now, whether, I mean, what that means, who knows? Did they just show up at the odd conference? Did they have to take a course of some kind? I don't know. But, their names are all listed there. And yeah, a lot of them are in Trudeau's cabinet. Not only that, but at least one of them is still on the board of trustees. That's Chrysler Freeland. It looks like Mark Carney also was on the board of trustees and may still be. It's hard to say when you Google around. I mean, I have a sneaking suspicion a lot of people are scrambling now to get their names removed because the light is off, the shine is off the World Economic Forum, I think, at the moment. So yes, but these people exist everywhere. I mean, the young global leaders are everywhere. They're all over the world, and they come from all parts of the globe. They're Chinese, they're African, they're this, that, they're everywhere. And then, of course, you have the actual the big players like Bill Gates, like some of the big tech people, and who are, and then they have a full staff as well. Many of these people are. It is a full-blown, fully developed organization. They've got headquarters in Geneva. And I think they've got offices in New York. I mean, this is and they put out papers all the time, and they put out. They're all there to be read. They've got a whole list of the companies which are associated with them alphabetically. You click on an alphabet. A letter of the alphabet, and then you get a whole stream of the companies which start with that letter of the alphabet. So no, this is my big concern. I have to say, my big concern about the World Economic Forum is that it is positioning to become an adjunct of the United Nations and to take on a global economic role, not unlike what the World Health Organization is doing. So, and now, as you know, I mean, we've got everybody, as this pandemic illustrated so clearly. I mean, nobody would dare issue a word until the World Health Organization came out first. I mean, here in this country, we didn't declare a pandemic, although you would have thought that we had the expertise to decide for ourselves whether or not we were part of a pandemic. Nobody breathed out of a word until the World Health Organization said, yes, it's a pandemic. And away we went. We were all in a pandemic. So, and I thought, well, couldn't Mrs. Tam have said something about this herself? But it turns out she sits on the board I believe she's actually on the board, or she's our representative at the World Health Organization. I expect she'll get if she were to leave her position today, she'd get a very nice sinecure at the World Health Organization. So you see these of things that the technocrats have it nicely sewn up for themselves. Yeah.
And herein lies the conspiracy. So when I look at this, I see people who support and are supported by the WEF in positions of power, influencing policy. Let's take, for instance, Bill Gates and Justin Trudeau, just because they're easy to talk about because they're so corrupt. Both have vested financial interests in the pandemic response that the WEF has said, and the WHO has said that we need to do, which is mass vaccinations. No matter whether they work or not, apparently, and that's just my opinion, YouTube, they accept these proposals from WHO, WEF, and they push them on us, and they benefit financially from these things. And these are only two of dozens or maybe hundreds of ties to people that are benefiting from bad policy they're able to force on us.
Yeah, I'm not sure about Trudeau. I mean, I wouldn't. I know nothing about his financial interests in anything, but certainly Bill Gates is. He has. I mean, he brags openly about his investments in the pharmaceutical companies, how much money he made, and of course the fact that he is involved in various aspects of their development as well.
Well, Justin Trudeau has a decent financial stake in a company out of Burnaby that manufactures the nanolipid technology that encapsulates part of the COVID vaccine. So, and this information is publicly available. It has been for quite a while, and it's not a secret that he actually benefits from this. But there's more examples from this, and I only use that one because
I'm not sure about that actually. I've had a look at that as well, and I think that's very difficult to make any categorical statements about that.
Okay,
anyway,
well, we can.
I'd be very surprised that he would be that blatant. I mean, I'm sure he would, whatever, if he ever had any interest, he certainly would have divested by now.
Nothing surprises me anymore. But the opportunity
for this is there. Trouble.
Pardon me?
I don't want you to get into any trouble here with this one.
I'm always in trouble, so I'm used to it. If I wasn't in trouble, I wouldn't know what to do with myself.
Okay.
So I guess where do we go from here? I mean, we have a premier in Alberta who has publicly stated that she has no interest in having the WEF involved in policy in Alberta, and she wants to eject them from our matters here. But what does this mean for the rest of Canada? And is our premier correct to do things more on our own rather than accept outside influences on our policy?
Well, I think that I mean the first thing any jurisdiction, any department within any jurisdiction should have a best practices unit, and that from there you check out to see what's going on in the rest of the world. They check out what's going on and what should they be adopting and what should they be adapting for their own purposes, and can they help anybody else? I'm all for, and I think cooperation, exchange of information, all of those things, whether and to have international organizations that help facilitate that is not a bad thing. Although increasingly we are able to do it ourselves because we live in the Zoom age, where we've got the internet. There's no excuse for not exchanging information anymore. But so I mean, technically, you have to say, why do we need the WEF? Well, we don't, except that somehow or other they've set themselves up, and we do have as these experts and authorities on certain matters, and somehow or other, people get sucked into it. There's a lot of glamour associated with it. These are high flyers. They're, the best people in the business and in the practice. And I mean, all of those things, highly, highly successful people. This is very seductive. And so, the question, what you have to say is, well, hold on, no, let's just take it easy here. Let's respect what they're doing, but maybe let's keep it all arm's length, please. And go from there. Because it is so amorphous, and because there's a psychology involved here in drawing people in. And I mean, I don't know if you read my piece on totalitarianism also in the C2C journal. This is another book that I reviewed for C2C journal, which is the Matthias Desmet book on the psychology of totalitarianism. And I mean, it is a very subtle process. I mean, how people are seduced and drawn in, and who, if you have exactly the right conditions to, that lend you to being seduced and taken in by something, that it can be all enveloping. And the problem is that this happens at the societal level. It's not something that happens just to one or two people. Whole peoples get pulled into totalitarian style thinking. It's not just imposed. Totalitarianism is seldomly imposed. It's something that builds up within people, and they all buy into a narrative. Oh, all the experts, right? Oh, we got to listen to the experts.
And then by buying into it, they become some sort of virtuous, because they're a virtuous good person because
And even when it becomes clear that bad things are happening and things are, it is that much more difficult for them to withdraw or step aside or say no, that. So it's very important that the ones who are on top of this speak out. Matthias is very good on the subject of how those who are aware of what's going on must approach this with the utmost respect and kindness and unaggressively, because the last thing you want, you want to bring these people out of their totalitarian mindset as best you can without making things worse.
So what happens if we don't? What happens if we just let this run its course and allow these influences to influence our policy and keep our head in the sand? Everything's fine, no problems. We're just going to go with it. Where are we headed?
You can't. Well, we have to keep speaking out as we are now. There's no question about that. And then, and sooner or later, you're going to get a critical mass of people who are going to figure this out as well. The danger is, there comes a tipping point where to all totalitarian regimes or systems, I wouldn't call them regimes, and it's systems tip into atrocities. And then hopefully that's when everybody, hopefully it doesn't get to that. You want to be able to get people out of that mindset before that happens. So no, it's very important where how society handles its dissidents, how it handles its how we handle our how we protect free speech, how we go about facilitating debate, how we I'm very big on one of my very, very big pet peeves is the subject of how language is used, abused, and distorted. And particularly the issue of name calling, which I feel there are several levels involved in the whole sphere of name calling. Of course, everybody remembers of how Trudeau demonized the truckers, right, and name calling them.
The small fringe minority. We've heard a lot in Alberta here for sure. Embarrassing cousin, sewer rats. I've been called a rebel and a scofflaw.
Sure.
It's never ending.
Okay. So let's take name calling at level 1, which is the bully boy in the schoolyard and calls somebody else an awful name. And you know why he does it is because he probably, he can't make the case. He can't figure out any other way of communicating and getting his bully boy ways. So
right.
He resorts to name calling, and the retort is, sticks and stones may button, names will never hurt me. So then the next level up is at a similar level where you've got an honest argument going, and the person literally can't make the case for his side of whatever he thinks his case is, but he can't make it. And hence the phrase, name calling is the last refuge of the intellectually bankrupt. They can't make the case, so they resort to name calling. So that's when again, this guy just, they've lost it. They don't know what they're talking about. So just, you let it go. Where it gets pernicious is where you have at the political level, where name calling is now being used for one of two purposes. First is to shut down debate. You want to shut down debate, then you call somebody a name. And often it works because nobody likes to be called a name. So you don't fight back. You can make your case, but you don't like to fight back. So, and that's it. And that's, you're a racist, you're this, that, you're homophobic, you're whatever. The politicians, this happens in our politics all the time. And there's no doubt in my mind that that's what it's all about, is to shut down the debate.
And it goes further and further into atrocities, right? And one thing that surprises me is the WEF is very, very clear, and they don't hide it at all, on one of their goals is to depopulate. And the number is mind-blowing. They say that we should only have 1.5 billion people on the planet. That means that 7 billion people will not be on the planet. And it's,
Oh, we don't talk about how we get there, right? Of course, they'll volunteer to go first, right?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure they would. Yes, absolutely,
right.
absolutely. But
I know.
I find
But
that
let me get to the final and most pernicious, which is the pathologizing of your political opponents, because this is where it gets very sinister. Once you reduce your political opponent to something that's unspeakable, something that's just the scum of the earth, that's just too awful, you can't even. There, you finally set up the situation where not only do you not have to debate with them, it's not just about shutting down debate, it's, oh, you don't have to debate. They're just too unworthy, too awful, too, and then this is how the Jews were treated by Nazi Germany. And you've got, then the next step is, what's the next step? Well, they're so unspeakable, so awful, so scum of the earth.
they're dirty.
So it's all right. So it's all right if we just dispose of them. That's pathologizing your political opponent. That's a wonderful phrase. It's not mine, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the fellow who came up with it, but it is so just engrave that in your memory. Pathologizing your political opponent,
Likening your opponent to a virus that needs to be vaccinated away.
Yeah, something like that. Yes. So these are the things to watch for, and it's very important. People like you and I speak out about this all the time.
Well, we certainly appreciate the efforts that you're making on this, and I have no intention of stopping. We see what's coming, and it's out in plain sight. And I like, sometimes I feel like we're just shouting from the rooftops, and that actually brings up a question. I believe one of the questions came from the Facebook stream. Is Alberta the only province with ties to the WEF, or is the WEF infiltrated other provinces and other levels of government in Canada?
Yes, the Liberals have contracted with the WEF to do something with regard to a digital ID system.
Yes, I believe our Alberta Bank, the ATB, is also involved in that, along with the digital currency.
Yes. So you can see where this one's going. There's been a lot of talk about digital currencies and central bank digital currencies, but so far we haven't heard that. Well, we have heard about digital IDs, particularly because so many of us thought that the vaccine passport was the first step towards a digital ID system. And you flash your passport and you can come in here, or you can't go there. You can only do this, and you can't do that. That's what the passport facilitated. Well, one step from that would be a whole system that gives us, now, okay, you can see how, this might have some merits, how attractive it would be. And your average citizen might think, gee, yeah, this is not a bad idea. We get all our records put into one system, and we don't have to flip around in files, and we don't have to. But at the same time, once you're digitized, it means somebody has access to all of that information. And now, unlike before, it's all in one place. Heck, you can even have it implanted in your skin. Sweden already has the model for that little thing that goes, in your wrist or wherever else. So no, one of the things we have to be aware of with developments like this, of course, is just watch to see what's going on in China, which already has a digital ID system and has a social credit system, and they are monitored for how they behave. It's used as a behavior modification scheme. If depending on how well you behave, you get some points, and if you don't behave very well, you get points subtracted, or you're prevented from doing certain things. So yes, it's this is the downside. The convenience.
Well, it sounds great, because then if the government doesn't like what somebody's doing or speaking out against them, they could just turn them off. I mean, that would be amazing, right?
Well, don't count on it. They would turn off all kinds of other things before they turn you off, right?
Yeah.
And you'd be a useful example. So no, we are moving into once you move into the digital world and its uses for controlling behavior and for affecting and monitoring our health, and there is another upside is, yes, we could end up with all kinds of doodads that help us get better and help improve our health and all that kind of thing. And people say, great, let's have it more, let's more of it. But at the same time, you get this other side to the whole equation. So everything has to be, diligently, rigorously scrutinized before we buy into these things.
It seems like we're at a bit of a crossroads here, because in one of the videos I watched, you did mention that we are in the process of some sort of a transition. Like we're changing, things are changing, and there's more than one path we can take. So I think we're at a point where we're either going to go down a path that encourages human flourishing and the sanctity of life and the benefit to humanity, or not, right? So is that, do you want to comment on that? Your comments about how we are in a type of a revolution and things are changing.
Yes.
What do you say about that?
Yes, we are. We've been through the technological transition cycle. There's a lot of scholarship on it, and the cycle is driven by innovations and by energy transitions and innovations, usually which are predicated on it, and usually they take place in the transportation system. So you had it used to be when we moved from wind and sail technology, which opened up the world to exploration. We moved then to steam and railways, and then we moved to internal combustion engine and cars and these, the railways. The way these things change things, it's the magnitude of the changes that these innovations affected are staggering. When you stop and consider how well the railway system opened up, the wind and sail technology brought people to North America. You had the railway system, which opened up the West. It happened here in Canada. It happened in the West, in the U.S. Then you had the oil and auto era, which brought us suburbs and highway systems and 3-car garages. And then from there, we moved to the internet. The internet then changed everything again. Then it opened up. And these systems have tended so far to be all about delivering goods and services faster, further, more cheaply. Okay? That's mostly what they've been. They've all been about improving the quality of life and creating, bringing all kinds of things to us that we wouldn't have had otherwise, and they arrive faster and more cheaply. Okay, so you have to think about, how all those transitions worked and the big changes that they affected on the world, on the planet. Now we're looking at the full effects of the digital revolution, and the question is, where does that take us? Because it's no longer merely about faster, further, more cheaply. It's about who we are, what we are. They're fooling around with our what it means. Well, in fact, actually, Klaus Schwab actually says this. It could actually change what it means to be a human being. So, we really have to think about where science and technology now takes us, because before it was a no-brainer for sure. To get on a train was great. It wasn't going to change your life. Well, maybe it would change your life because it got you somewhere faster, further, more cheaply, but it didn't change your moral or your cultural outlook. This is different. What is happening now is different. And whether we're talking about, how the vaccines, what goes into what these vaccines, or whether, where that whole technology is going to take us, or, transhumanism is now a word that's out there. Transhumanism? Think cyborgs. Sure, we all like our implants, and we've got new knees and new hips and things like that. But think where this goes, what the next step in all of that might be. The implications here are vast. I mean, the people who were quite eloquent on this whole subject are people like Yuval Harari. You know, he's a World Economic Forum favorite. He's always at their conferences, and of course, he's a best-selling author. He's an historian, and he as well as a futurist. So he pulls this stuff together and gives us a glimpse of where some of this stuff might go. I mean, he's blatant about the fact, for instance, that automation now could obviate the need for our labor that gave us meaning and purpose in our lives to do good manual work and good hard labor. We could end up, he says, we're going to end up with a whole new class of people, which he openly calls useless people, the useless class.
Useless eaters.
Yes. And sure, what are we going to do with them? How will we, and so, and you can see this creeping in. I mean, universal basic income is a de facto recognition that we are going now to have this class of people that will be effectively unemployable for whatever reason. We will dignify it with all kinds of flowery language, Orwellian language. We will it'll be, but you say to yourself, hold on, I mean, is this necessary? Is this necessary? Is this really what we want?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I was watching a video of one of the World Economic Forum. I can't remember his name. It escapes me, but he's one of the senior speakers, and he was talking about how we now have the technology and capability to hack humans, and we can hack them and change them and make them. And I don't mean like hacking limbs off. I mean changing the way they think and the way they live.
Sure.
So not if you don't like the way your population is acting, well, now you can hack them to make them more subservient and more submissive. And the technology really is there. I mean, he's not wrong, but these are the kind of ideas that they're talking about.
Yes, no, absolutely. And I mean, so it raises big questions. I mean, it has religious and moral import, philosophical import that really has to. We really have to think through before we allow this stuff to happen.
There's a question that came up. I'd like to know the answer. The question is, you said that the AHS contracted with the WEF. Do you know the names of the person or persons who signed the contract with AHS? Or on behalf of AHS, pardon me.
No, I don't. But there is a fellow there's a video. If you just Google the Alberta Health Services and World Economic Forum, and there's a whole page and a nice video by a nice gentleman who talks it all up, and it sounds great. Anyways, just Google it. I don't remember his name. He's quite a highly placed in Alberta Health Services.
So these aren't just conspiracy theories. This is real life.
Oh no, sure, yeah, and then also so is this digital ID thing that's going on with the Trudeau government.
I think if we had digital ID 2 years ago, there's no way I would have been able to stand up and protest what my government was doing. I really don't. A lot of these policies and things would have completely.
Indeed, yeah. So it's a hornet's nest of major issues, and it's not technical, financial, moral, and philosophical as well. Not, I mean, of course, scientific too. It's the least different.
Yeah.
But yeah, you see, we have now, I mean, the new prophets are our experts. People have more faith in experts than they do in politicians, for instance. So, and an expert comes along and tells them that this is good for them. So, how do you get people to think this through? That's the big issue. How do you get them to think it through?
it's a difficult process because we have people that they go out on a limb, they stick their necks out, they speak out against something, and they stand to lose a lot for doing it. Oftentimes they're persecuted, they lose their jobs, they lose their standing, lose their position, but they're trying to warn people. They're screaming from the rooftops, we need to change course because we're going to hit an iceberg and it's not going to be good. And I find that virtuous. I don't think it's virtuous to just stand with the next big thing. I find virtue in questioning things and making sure that what we're doing is the right thing before we do it. That's virtuous to me.
Yes, absolutely. And keep it local. I mean, solutions have to exist at local levels. And hopefully that way you maintain community, that way you maintain, support systems, and that way you maintain your culture, maintain your values.
So there's actually quite a few questions come up. One of them I find interesting is there WEF police stations? Is that a thing?
No, I think the viewer is confusing this with the Chinese, who apparently have a number of police stations located around Canada.
Yeah, but that's okay because that was just to administer stuff that needed administration while they couldn't get back to China for because of COVID. So don't worry about the Chinese police stations. It's totally fine, totally normal. It's not normal.
No.
What other questions are on here? There was a comment regarding my statement about Trudeau and his financial interest in this stuff. There's a man named David Martin who goes into this in quite a bit of detail.
Yes.
I believe the name of the company is Akitas Therapeutics or something like that. Anyway, it's something to consider for sure.
Yeah, I'm familiar with his I'm familiar with his arguments.
Okay. What else we got here? Question. Are you aware that the WEF is partnered with Alberta Investment Management Corporation, AIMCO, a crown corporation owned by the province of Alberta and one of Canada's largest and most diversified institutional investment managers, established in 2008, which manages $100 billion. And they invest 32 Alberta-based pensions, endowments, and government funds, including the Alberta Savings Trust Fund. I'm
aware of that. No, AIM is I'm very familiar. I'm not very familiar, but I do know of that organization. And yes, very prestigious, very effective, and has been very successful. But I can't imagine why they'd be partnering with the WEF. Does the viewer say what the contract is or why they've partnered with the WEF?
No, the question was basically, are you aware that the WEF is partnering with them? And I don't know anything about it because I haven't looked into it previous to this, but
I don't know it either.
Maybe we'll try and look that up after the fact and comment back at a later date when we have some more information. Is the Great Reset a real threat to democracy? That is a viewer question.
Yes, I'm leery of big sweeping statements like that. I mean, look at where that got Biden. I mean, if you elect the Republicans, you kiss democracy goodbye. Good grief, democracy in action there, for Pete's sake. Is it a threat to democracy? At the moment, no, it is not. But if the whole point about what they're doing, and if they were to become what I fear, which is an adjunct of the United Nations, in which they have absolute control over how the world economy works, then yes, absolutely they would. Because what is happening is this thing about, faceless technocrats in remote institutions coming up with their Stalinist solutions for how the world should work, without the rest of us having a say in it whatsoever. And and we have and countless politicians who slip in and out of their jobs, who then are stuck with treaties that previous governments have signed, and then they look bad because they have to want to pull out because they don't like the democratic implications of what's going on. So ultimately, the answer is yes, it would be, if they actually got their way. Now, thank goodness, for instance, the World Health Organization, which actually went through a whole process in order to assign to itself absolute power over how pandemics are managed globally. Whether India and China would listen to them, give them the time of day on that kind of thing, I don't know, but the rest of us certainly would. Is thank goodness they didn't get it through. Why? Because the African nations objected, and of course the African nations have had it up to here with the Western countries, and had so many bad experiences. Said, no, thank you very much. We don't want you telling us about how to handle pandemics. So, but I gather they're right back at the table trying to figure out how to get this through. So, there goes bye-bye any democratic, rights where the next pandemic is concerned.
Well, we may be more than a few steps into this. And from what I'm gathering from what you're saying is it depends how much of our own sovereignty we give up to these outside organizations. And we've started to do that in Canada. As a matter of fact, our own prime minister, I don't know if he slipped up, referred to Canada as the first post-nation state, implying that we've given up some of our own control over our own destiny to outside forces and no longer govern ourselves.
Yeah, yes, that would be the logical conclusion from what he said, except I don't think he knew what he was talking about at the time. Post-national state was just one of those fashionable terms, and used in political theory circles. What it boils down to is, yes, you still have your nation state, but there are so many things going on. I mean, from open borders to yes, international treaties to this, that, and the other thing, and and that the nation state itself ceases to have any meaning, and that is a real threat. I mean, and there are people out there who really believe that the nation state is a detriment to humanity. I.e., if we just gave up our borders and gave up our nationality and gave up, all this, that, and the other thing, that we would be better people. This utopian ideal that somehow we're all citizens of the world. But of course, it totally ignores the fact that you need an organizing principle of some kind for how you conduct your life and how you conduct, what rules you set for your communities and how you're going to interact with each other. So, we all want our basic freedoms, but we all accept the fact that we do need to cooperate and obey certain rules in order to live together peacefully, and also sign on to shared values and shared ideas about how the world should work. And I don't, for my money, certainly, and I think there's I think we'd be very hard pressed to find a better organizing principle than the nation state. Still the best one out there. I'm sure there are all kinds of other ideas about how we should organize ourselves, but the nation state is still pretty good.
Well, and it allows people to live in a place that governs the way they want to be governed, and has culture that they appreciate, and everybody's different, and we all, we don't have to all be under the same rules. We can have different rules and different ethical boundaries for different groups, but we can appreciate the differences. We don't have to subscribe to the same thing in order to coexist. At least I don't think.
Indeed. But the globalist agenda clearly is counter the nation state. There's no question about that.
I agree. Okay, so we're just over an hour here, so I'm going to just maybe take a couple more questions. This one here, it's from, it actually doesn't say, but it's off the Facebook page, I believe. Some believe there is a coordinated effort by the elite class to make the general public more reliant on government, wanting safety rather than freedom, and generally more slave-minded. Strong wording there. Do you believe this may be the case? Have you seen evidence of this?
Interestingly, Matthias Desmet deals with this, touches on this issue in his book, The Psychology of Totalitarianism. And he points out absolutely that there is one of the big problems with having individual responsibility and living in free societies is how many people really don't want the responsibility. of having to make decisions for themselves, being accountable for them, having to look after themselves, all those things. And that there is, a whole cadre of people who really are quite happy being told what to do.
Well, those things are scary at times.
Yes, of course. And who were quite happy to, and in fact, this is his whole thesis around the psychology of totalitarianism, that if you have a situation where people are sufficiently unsettled, that is, they go through enough in terms of personal traumas, societal traumas, and they are discombobulated to the extent that they are disturbed, and they have and they have a hard time finding meaning in life, and they something comes along that unsettles them even further, poor relationships, bad jobs, I use the example, I like the example of what happened in Nazi Germany, where you have a very good people who went through the First World War, came out of the First World War, went into a major hyperinflation. And none of us has any sense of what a hyperinflation is like, having lived through it. It only lasted a year, but it reduced people. It not only debased the currency, but totally debased human character to the extent that your money was worthless. And so people had to resort to extraordinary measures just to live. People lost their savings, their pensions went out the window. But people thieved, they prostituted themselves in order just to get by. So they went through this whole traumatic experience. And then, as they were just coming out of it, and then they went, as they were coming out of it, and new currency and what have you, then some of the foreign, they started getting foreign aid. The U.S. stepped up and helped them out with their rebuilding their economy, and lo and behold, along comes 1929, in which they bang, and the Great Depression, and they are right back at square one. Unemployment, massive unemployment, still fresh, the hyperinflation is still fresh in their mind. Well, somebody like Hitler comes along, promises them stability, and that they're good people, and that they're going to do great things. Well, it was a no-brainer. These were people who were traumatized, and then they just fell right into the totalitarian system.
Mankind's always looking for a savior. Yes,
but in their case, they had been so, as I say, traumatized by so many, by those events of the previous decades, a war that they lost, massive reparations, hyperinflation. It was just hair-raising what they went through, and they were which set them up for then what followed. Now, we have not been through anything that bad. But all you need is a society which is not happy with life as their families are falling apart, their jobs are meaningless. There's a book out there with this actually is called Shit Jobs. That's a huge phenomenon. Think of the people now who are staying home from work. They don't want to come into work.
Quiet. They got used to it.
Quiet quitting. Well, But that's again another sign, because it says that people don't want, a healthy society wants to work. A healthy society wants to get up and go, and they want to have babies. They want to work hard. They want all the stuff that's going to bring them, and that's not happening right now. And why isn't it happening? And that's it's a psychological phenomenon. So the answer to the viewer's question is. I think I lost sight of it, but have I answered it? I think I answered it anyway.
I think so. It was the question was, are people becoming more reliant on government, and is this something by design?
That's right. And so you've got, out of all of that, people just sign on and say, please look after me. Yeah, quite happy to have that happen. And that, how you change that around is I don't know. I think that, I do know. What you need is a rip-roaring economy that gives everybody a shot at really improving their life.
You know what? That's what we're trying to do in Alberta here. We're trying to do something that's never been done before and lead by example and show people that there is a better way than buying into this woke global elitist agenda where human life isn't celebrated. We want to do something different here. And there's a really big growing movement, which is, that's what the APP is promoting. So now that I mentioned that I'm only doing a couple more questions, there's a bunch of questions come in. So I'll try and get through them quickly. So question, according to Leslyn Lewis, MP, the WEF is in favor of and openly promotes the use of digital ID, ESG scores, and central bank digital currencies, among other policies that centralize power to the federal government. Is, in fact, the WEF actively involved with the Canadian federal government in promoting this? And I already know the answer is yes. And have they signed agreements or partnered with WEF on any of this? Also, has the UN, in fact, partnered with the WEF to accelerate Agenda 2030?
Don't know, but I wouldn't be at all surprised. I mean, the idea of a central bank digital currency, never mind your own local currency. I mean, there's a whole thesis out there that says we'd have one central bank, and they want to cut out the banks too, right? So it's not just that you've got the central bank who's sending you your money and you're paying your taxes, and it's all a one-way effort. Cut out the government, cut out the you forget your RBCs and your Scotiabanks and everybody else and your local bank around the corner. I mean, these are going to end up disappearing as well. So no, e-commerce e-commerce is just the tip of the iceberg to where this could go. And again, you see, it's a tool for manipulation and management and control. So this is why all this stuff is so scary. But yes, it's definitely out there. And who's doing it, how quickly, I don't know. I'll tell you one thing. For instance, Mark Carney, I know while he was governor of the Bank of England, commissioned a lot of studies on this, presumably with a view to implementing it while he was governor there. And I know he's discussed this at places like Jackson Hole and other prestigious places. So he certainly is up on all of this, as they all are. But most of us, of course, we don't know what our central banks get up to. And even our politicians aren't very good at understanding our central banks and monetary policy and fiscal policy and what have you. I mean, this is one of the sad things about the state of the equality for politicians too.
That I became all too aware of our politicians' lack of involvement in politics and policy over the last 2 years, because I've met quite a few of them, and I've asked certain politicians, MLAs and MPs, about their opinions on certain bills or pieces of legislation that have been passed. And my response was, oh, well, I didn't even read that. I'm like, what do you mean you didn't read? You voted on it.
Yes.
How do you voted on policy that you didn't read?
I mean, that speaks to another whole big issue, which is the state of our political, our party system and what our political parties are really all about and what they're up to. I mean, the sad fact is that the only way you get elected these days is if you know how to sell memberships. Mm-hmm. You're there as a cash cow for your party. That's basically it. And to vote for whatever is the central, the prime minister's office, the premier's office tells you to vote for. So no, you're basically relieved of having to do any homework on any specific policy issue. So
that is scary.
Yes, it is.
Very scary.
That's party discipline. And I mean, you understand why party discipline is necessary. And because you don't get, one of the things about our parliamentary system is the fact that it does get things done, and it gets things done thanks to party discipline. And that we have this first past the post system and all the rest of it. Things do get done. You don't get tangled up in a mess like they do, for instance, in the US. But but yeah, I mean, there's a whole other webinar that can be done just on the party system and what, how it could be improved and how you could improve the effectiveness of our politicians.
I certainly agree. So I don't actually know how long this webinar is supposed to go. So I'm just going to keep on putting up questions until someone says, hey, it's time to wrap up. And these two actually, if you're okay with that.
Sure, no problem.
These two actually go hand in hand. So the question is, are you worried that the Great Reset will become reality in Canada? If so, how do we stop it? And I think we touched on this a little bit previous, but maybe we'll go a little further into it. The second question is, how does the average person fight back or protect themselves from these type of agendas? So number one, are you worried about the Great Reset coming to Canada? What do we do to stop it? And how do we stop it?
Well, there's no question that this is part of the progressive left, certainly their ambition, part of their ambition. I mean, just the fact that you've had people like Trudeau and Freeland actually using language directly from prescribed by the World Economic Forum. I mean, this is Build Back Better. That's all World Economic Forum language. Opportunity. The pandemic was an opportunity, to, hey, build back better. So this is not only is the World Economic Forum coming up with prescriptions for how the world should work, they're actually giving you the language for how to sell it and how to sell it to your constituents. So yes, now in the end, we still are a sovereign nation, and in the end, we can still, make our views known to our politicians, and we can certainly make sure that the politicians we want are elected. That much power we still have, but that depends on, as I say, people being aware and educating themselves about these things and seeing past the glamour and the authority of the experts, because of course in the end it's the experts then who are our new prophets. By the way, I mean, I saw that's a great line from the book Against the Great Reset. The new prophets are our experts, because we don't even have religion anymore. I mean, I'm sure many of your viewers do, and I do, but a lot of people out there don't have any religion. And so who are they looking to? They're looking to the experts to be the prophets. So
the new gods.
The new gods, and they're willing to swallow it all hook, line, and sinker without giving it a second thought. So and science, science is the new religion. So you have to be able to see past it, and the other side that's very seductive about all of this is, of course, that along with these digital, tracking systems and what have you, you're also going to have all kinds of promises about how much healthier you're going to be and how it's going to be much easier to, so you'll get that kind of thing will be thrown in with it. The pandemic was all about, they scared us to death. Again, here's one of the here's a technique that is well used in totalitarian regimes, where you create a situation that involves a lot of fear. You scare people to death. Well, they did it with us with all those case numbers, right? And all those videos from Italy and China, people collapsing dead from COVID. And so they scared us to death. So of course we rushed off to get the vaccine. But this is a standard technique. You create fear, and then you come along with the authoritarian regime that is going to take your fear away, make you feel safe. So again, we have to be prepared to look past our fears and say, is my safety really worth that? And am I going to be safe anyway?
There's a quote that comes to mind, and I can't remember exactly how it goes, but it's something like, those who give up their freedom in the name of safety inevitably lose both.
Yes. Yeah.
So here's a statement, and I'm going to look into this because this is the first I've heard of it. That's not a question, but it's kind of interesting that this came up. So it's not a statement that he wants to make public, but this isn't a right or a left thing. this whole idea of what the WEF is promoting, ESG, digital currency, digital IDs, all of these things that lead to totalitarianism. At the UCP AGM, their policy was being voted on regarding ESG. I was very surprised to see it. It was something I would expect to see at the NDP AGM. So no, Gabriel's correct. This isn't a right or a left thing, because what I find from the right-leaning political groups these days is that oftentimes they're more comfortable going with the next shiny new thing rather than focusing on their core conservative values. And so this isn't a right or left thing. I mean, any politician of any stripe can be affected by this, and it will make its way into party policy at one point or another.
Indeed.
To appease those new gods.
Yes, yes. Well, the viewer will be interested to know that no less a light than Jamie Dimon. If you've never heard of Jamie Dimon, be aware that he is probably the most powerful banker in North America. He runs JP Morgan. And is he's come out solidly against ESG in no uncertain terms. There's a video out there of him making his views known in very colorful language. No, the problem is that here we are, again, there's a great essay in the book about the economic effects of the world of the Great Reset, which is, here we are in North America, throughout the West, in fact, putting all our investments into things like ESG and climate change, and trying to do all the woke things and equality of outcome and this, that, and the environment, social governance. I mean, this is all the things that ESG stands for, and massive amounts of money on top of all of the debt that went into that we incurred as a result. First of all, of the Great Recession, because loads of liquidity was spilled into the economy, and then the pandemic, even more liquidity went into the economy. I mean, our debt is just through the roof. So here we are dealing with all this debt, and on top of it, we're now, pandering to and dealing with climate change and all those other issues, while you've got China has already implemented the Great Reset. How has it done it? 5G. 5G technology, there's an argument in the book to the effect, and I think he's pretty close to getting this right. 5G technology promises to be the new railway system in this world. Why? Because it is a tracking device that means that you can track all of your goods, all of your managed through your ports with this simple electronic innovation. That moves things in mass and bulk in a way that has never been moved before. And it is happening right now, because what you've got in China, I forget which port it is, I mean, a massive port system, which has containers moving out, I mean, by their millions, while in the West, we can't even get a few ships going with goods and services. This is where our, this is all about the supply chain, right? I wish I had the figures in front of me. I don't, but it's in my essay on C2C Journal, exactly what China has accomplished with 5G.
Where can we find that?
Pardon me?
Where can we find that? Where can we find some of your other?
Just Google C2C. That's capital C, to the digit, C, number 2, C, and then my name, Margaret Kopala. But even if you go to just C2C, Margaret Kopala, Margret Kopala. And you'll see there my most recent essay is on Against the Great Reset. The previous essay is the Matthias Desmet piece on totalitarianism and psychology of totalitarianism. The previous essay is on why the vaccine mandates had to go, and I dig down into some of the science around the vaccines. And the first essay was on why treatments are so controversial, i.e., ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. And there I drill down into the business and the medical industrial complex that's behind the vaccines.
Okay, so we posted that up in the comments, I believe, as a link. So if you want to check that out, you feel free to do so. And actually, you probably should. I'm going to thumb through there.
Where do
and
I
check
find
some
that
stuff
in
out too.
chat? In chat.
Pardon me?
Do I find that in the chat area?
I see it on my side here, but I think what they've done is they posted it on the Facebook live stream as well. So the viewers can see the link to that you just mentioned.
Okay.
What else? Oh, speaking of supply chain, the question came up a little while ago. How is the WEF involved in our food sources and supply chains? Is it concerning?
I do not believe that that's to hand yet. But I wouldn't be surprised that the many of their membership are involved in food services and transportation systems there too. And don't forget, you've got Bill Gates who's buying up all this farmland.
Yeah.
Nobody's quite sure why and what he's going to do with it, but
solar panels
would end up eating bugs. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have a cricket farm in Alberta. Apparently, at the Calgary Stampede this year, they featured mealworm, or was it mealworm hot dogs and cricket? I can't remember what it was, but yeah, they were serving mealworms and crickets at the Calgary Stampede, of all places. And I think they sold some, which is even more concerning.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, that's all the questions that I have, unless I missed some. One question I don't understand, I'll just throw it out there just in case it's something you're familiar with. What is your opinion of mediated reality?
Ooh, that's a new term for me. Never heard of it. What mediated reality? I mean, this sounds really woke and or
I'm not sure, but I'll do some little Google searches later on and look into it, so I can answer next time. And yeah, that's pretty much all the time I've got. We're an hour and 45 minutes into it, and it's been very enlightening. I mean, you go into depth of some of these things that I've only been feeling, and you kind of explain it in a very well thought out and easily digestible manner. So I really appreciate that. And I'm sure the viewers do too. So one more time, just let everybody know where they can find your stuff. So if they have any more questions, they can hopefully read first. And then I'm assuming there's some sort of a contact you thing on your page or something like that, or?
Yes. I think there's an email address. Anyway, yeah. The C2C journal is where my most recent work is. I've been doing, since the pandemic. That got me going, and I got back to writing again. So I, as it were, kind of came out of retirement to do that because I was just so riled up. So I'm just hoping beyond hope that this doesn't turn into the biggest the biggest public policy disaster in human history. I'm just so worried about this. And if you talk to Peter McCullough, you'll know why I feel that way. So that's what really got me out of retirement and got me back into writing again. So C2C is my most recent work. I'm also the author of a book called the Dogbone Portfolio. It's an investor's guide into what I call the first Kondraty winter of the 21st century. This is the technological transition cycle that I talked about. I know a lot about this. And so I still have some copies available for that. If there's a website for that, which is the dogboneportfolio.com. And what else? I still have some of my old columns are still up. I look at them every now and again. I think, yeah, that still makes sense. So while I was a columnist, I did a lot of work on. I sort of worked in three motifs kind of developed. First of all, I took a strong position on marijuana legalization, cannabis legalization, which and the mental health effects, particularly because of its mental health effects. And the second thing I really dug down into was Senate reform. I know a lot about Senate reform and have some interesting ideas on that, and immigration. And as a result of my work back then on immigration issues and what I was learning about it and how it was being managed, I became involved with a large group of former ambassadors and senior public servants on the subject of immigration, and so there's some enlightening stuff there about that as well.
Well, regarding the Senate reform, I see a comment that there is some interest to have you back to talk about that, because that's something that is very interesting to us in Alberta. And
yes, of course. Yes, of course. I followed it with great interest at the time, and I still think that there's some constructive work to be done in this area without really, digging down into the Constitution and doing all that stuff that we went through with the Charlottetown Accord. Politicians have since sworn off it because they don't want to open that can of worms. But it seems to me there's a way of going about this that is, I mean, for Pete's sake, you had Ralph Klein and Jean Charest, for instance, did some very good work in their day when they set up the House of the I think at the time they were calling it the House of the Provinces, but when the premiers were meeting, they had this little thing that they call the House of the Provinces. So that's something that I think should really be looked at again and pursued in some way.
Absolutely. So that kind of helps me.
Institutional integrity. I mean, I think that a core security of any nation state is institutional integrity, and I mean that is something that we really, really in this country need to rehabilitate. I mean, our party system, our legislatures, and our key institutions. That is finally. I mean, our institutions are the backbone of their country, and I mean, in a country like ours, we have Quebec and so many diverse interests and struggling and pulling and pushing and what have you. And you have to have watertight institutions that everybody whose integrity everybody buys into.
Yeah, like we used to have journalists like that. I remember that. It was comforting to know that we had integrity in our media, and we could be, things that were offered to us through the media were generally unbiased, told both stories, and we're free to make our own. So it does feel nice to have institutions with integrity, the media being one of them.
That's right. Exactly. Yes.
So some of this last little bit of the conversation is going to help me a lot with my wrap up, because I wasn't quite sure how I was going to wrap up, but I do have to, because I've got 10 minutes before my next interview. So what I wanted to say is the Alberta Prosperity Project, we are a group of very motivated individuals. We see these things happening around us. We see our federal government taking us down the path that groups like the WEF and the WHO want for Canada. We don't think it's good. We think it's anti-human, and a lot of people share these interests. Now, the problem with Alberta within Confederation is that our voices are not loud enough to influence change. We just can't do it. I mean, the entire western part of Canada will vote blue. It doesn't matter. We get liberal policies for the next 4 years, and that's the way it is. It's been that way for 117 years, and we can't do anything about that. But we also know that it is critically important that somebody or some group or some province stand up and we say, we are not going down that path. We're not going down the path to own nothing and be happy. We're not going to eat crickets. We are not going to have a digital currency and digital ID that you can shut off at any time. We are going to maintain our rights and freedoms. And federal government, if you don't like that, then we're not going with you. And this isn't to say that Alberta wants to leave or anything like that, but Alberta, there's a strong growing movement here that wants the leverage to tell the federal government, we're not going there with you. So that's what the Alberta Prosperity Project is about. It's about taking a stand and leading by example, and if need be, providing a place that is free of all of these things we've been discussing. Now, I hope that's not the case. I hope that we can be effective in negotiating with the federal government to stay away from all this WEF, WHO, global agenda crap that we're seeing, but it may not happen. So that's my message for tonight is people are asking, what do we do? That's what we do. We stand up, we use our voices, we take a stand. We give our politicians the leverage they need to negotiate with the federal government and say, no, we're not doing this. That's the way we win this kind of thing. It's never been about trusting in politicians. It's never been about hoping that a politician's going to save us. It's always been about us using our voices and taking a stand. And this is no different. So for all of you who are asking, what do we do? That's my opinion. That's what we do. We get involved in organizations like APP who say no to this stuff, and we build the membership to a point where we can't be ignored. And we're doing that. And conversations like this help immensely educate people as to why we need to do that. So, I mean, I can't even thank you enough for the work you do in order to get these things, like the digging you do to get this stuff to the public, to say, hey, pay attention, this is what's happening. We have to choose our path wisely, because up until even 2 years ago, when the COVID restrictions affected me personally, I had my head in the sand and I didn't get involved and I didn't pay attention or do any digging. So, from someone who has just started looking at this stuff to someone like you who has been doing this for, a lifetime, it really means the world to me, because had you not done that work and just started it now, we probably wouldn't have the tools we need to prevent these things going forward. So thank you.
Yes. Well, there's some excellent material out there. Read the books that I discuss, at C2C Journal, and go from there. I mean, the arguments are really well articulated, far better than I can do, and from major authorities. I mean, people who really know what they're talking about. I mean, I can give you the general. I'm a generalist. I can give you the general picture, and a pretty good picture, but it's not the same thing as really digging in and learning from the people who really thought this through.
Mm-hmm. Well, so I guess I'll close with that. If you haven't already, check out that link. It is c2cjournal.ca. You'll find that literature and some of the digging that's been done. And also, if you like this kind of thing and you want us to continue doing this, if you haven't already, please get your membership with the Alberta Prosperity Project. Doing so not only helps us do stuff like this with finances, but it also gives us a metric as to how receptive people are to this and how much appetite there is. So the more memberships we have, the more we know that this is what people want to hear, and we continue doing it. So please visit albertaprosperityproject.com and get your membership today if you haven't already. And Margaret, I would like to say thank you very much again for being a guest on our webinar here. And I'm really interested to see this, if we can make it happen, a whole webinar on Senate reform, because that's very near and dear to most of us in Alberta.
Okay, count me in.
Awesome, right on. Well, I'm sure Sean will get in touch with you and we'll line that up. And in the meantime, I will say good night and thank you very much. Thanks for watching, and enjoy the -30 here in Alberta.
Oh,
because
wow, it's so, wow. Of course,
it's
how cold it is there. Holy
-29 in Mirror, Alberta today. It's been a wonderful day of frozen water lines everywhere, and I'm sure I'll have another one tomorrow.
Everybody, that's how you spell that's how my name is spelled. So go to C2C Journal, Google Margaret Kopala, and you'll get the articles.
Awesome.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks again. Good night, everybody.